The greatest mistake most people make when they meet someone new is believing that words reveal character. They don't. Words reveal intention, image, and sometimes desire. But character is something far more stubborn. Character lives in behavior. It appears in patterns. It reveals itself through repeated choices, especially when no one is watching. Think about how quickly we form opinions. Someone smiles, compliments us, speaks confidently, and suddenly our mind begins writing a story. Our ancestors had to decide quickly whether someone was friend or foe. Today, that same instinct can become a weakness, because sophisticated people understand how to manufacture first impressions. The dangerous person rarely introduces themselves as dangerous. The manipulator often appears generous. The opportunist frequently looks supportive. The dishonest individual may be the one who speaks most passionately about honesty. This is why judging people by their own descriptions is one of the easiest ways to become deceived. Watch what they consistently do instead. There is an old psychological principle that behavior under comfort tells you very little. Anyone can appear loyal when there is nothing to gain from betrayal. Anyone can appear humble before success tests their ego. The real measure of a person begins when circumstances change. Observe how someone treats people they don't need. Notice how they respond when plans fail. Pay attention to what happens after they receive praise, power, or criticism. These moments strip away performance and expose personality. Human beings leak information constantly without realizing it. A person may speak about loyalty while regularly breaking small promises. They may claim to value honesty yet exaggerate simple stories to impress strangers. These contradictions are not accidents. They are windows into who they truly are. Most people ignore these small inconsistencies because they are distracted by emotional excitement. We enjoy feeling understood. We enjoy attention. We enjoy the possibility that we've finally found someone different. Emotion becomes a storyteller, inventing qualities that reality has not yet confirmed. This is where patience becomes a form of intelligence. That simple shift changes everything. It forces your emotions to follow reality, instead of forcing reality to follow your emotions. Someone can maintain an image for days, weeks, sometimes even months. But consistency requires genuine character. Eventually, stress arrives. Disappointment appears. Temptation enters the picture. Masks become heavy. Habits emerge. The truth begins to surface. The wisest observers never rush to label someone as good or bad after one interaction. They collect evidence quietly. They compare words with actions. They notice whether promises become reality. This doesn't mean becoming suspicious of everyone. It means respecting the complexity of human nature. Every person contains contradictions, but trustworthy people work to align their actions with their values. Untrustworthy people work to align their words with your expectations. That difference may seem small at first, but over the course of a relationship, it becomes the difference between peace and regret. Remember this: never trust the story people tell about themselves. Trust the story their actions write over time. Once you begin judging people by their actions rather than their promises, you naturally start noticing something even more revealing: the things they never intended to communicate. Human beings are constantly sending signals without realizing it. Every conversation contains two dialogues. One happens through words. The other happens through behavior. Ironically, the second conversation is usually the more honest one. Most people spend their lives listening only to what is said. The skilled observer watches what is shown. This is not about becoming obsessed with reading every facial expression or assuming that every nervous movement is proof of deception. Human behavior is far too complex for that. A single gesture rarely tells you anything meaningful. What matters is the pattern. Psychology teaches us that reliable conclusions come from clusters of behaviors, not isolated moments. Notice someone who constantly interrupts others while claiming to value respect. Or think about the person whose tone becomes noticeably colder whenever another person's success becomes the topic of conversation. These are not random details. They are emotional leaks. The conscious mind controls words. The unconscious mind often reveals itself through reactions. One of the most overlooked signals is emotional consistency. Authentic people tend to remain relatively stable across different situations. Their kindness does not disappear when they are frustrated. Their confidence does not collapse because someone disagrees with them. Their values remain recognizable, whether they are speaking to a waiter, a stranger, or someone with authority. People who are performing an identity often struggle with consistency. Their personality changes depending on who is in the room. Around powerful people, they become agreeable. Around weaker people, they become dismissive. Around successful people, they become competitive. Around vulnerable people, they suddenly become compassionate because it serves their image. They are not revealing character, they are adjusting strategy. This is why paying attention to emotional reactions is so valuable. Reactions happen faster than rehearsed responses. Watch how someone handles being corrected. Observe what happens when they don't get what they want. Envy, insecurity, resentment, humility, gratitude. These emotions are difficult to hide completely. They often appear for just a second before the social mask returns. Another powerful clue is the relationship between words and energy. People often focus on the content of speech while ignoring the emotional weight behind it. Someone may say, "I'm happy for you," yet their voice lacks warmth, their expression tightens, and the conversation quickly shifts back to themselves. Technically, we become participants instead of witnesses. But when you develop the habit of quiet observation, you begin noticing details that were always there. Interestingly, this process also sharpens your intuition. Many people describe intuition as a mysterious feeling, but it is often something much simpler. Your brain recognizes subtle behavioral patterns long before your conscious mind can explain them. That uneasy feeling around someone is not always irrational. Sometimes your mind has detected inconsistencies that you have not yet put into words. The goal is not to become suspicious of every person you meet. It is to become awake, to recognize that human beings communicate far more through consistency, reactions, and behavior than they ever do through carefully chosen words. The more quietly you observe, the less easily you are manipulated by appearances. Remember this: people can rehearse their words, but they rarely rehearse their unconscious reactions, and that is where the truth quietly lives. You can know someone for 10 years and never truly know who they are under pressure. On the other hand, a shorter relationship filled with consistent integrity may tell you far more about a person's character. Trust is not something you give because you hope someone deserves it. Trust is something you build because someone repeatedly earns it. This idea requires patience, and patience has become rare. We live in a world that encourages instant friendships, instant partnerships, and instant emotional investment. Social media allows people to manufacture closeness in days. But knowing facts about a person is not the same as understanding their character. Character only becomes visible when it is tested. Think about steel. It is impossible to know its true strength by looking at its surface. Only pressure reveals its quality. Human beings are remarkably similar. As long as life remains comfortable, many people appear honest, generous, and emotionally mature. There is little cost to displaying these qualities when nothing is at stake. But suddenly, you are no longer seeing the polished version of the person. You are seeing the one that emerges when comfort disappears. This is why wise people never rush important decisions about relationships. They allow life to reveal people naturally. They do not create elaborate tests or manipulate situations. Instead, they simply observe how ordinary challenges unfold. Notice how someone responds after making a mistake. Do they honor their word even when it costs them something? Pay attention to how they react when they receive constructive criticism. An insecure person often becomes defensive because criticism threatens the image they have carefully built. Small situations are often more revealing than dramatic ones. A person who is consistently late without respect for your time is revealing something about their priorities. Someone who speaks kindly to you but cruelly about everyone else is quietly showing you how they may eventually speak about you. The individual who constantly takes credit while avoiding responsibility is demonstrating a pattern that will likely continue long after the excitement of a new relationship fades. Everyone has bad days, and that is true. Everyone does have bad days. The difference is that emotionally healthy people acknowledge them, apologize when necessary, and make an effort to improve. Unhealthy patterns repeat themselves because they are not accidents. They are habits. Trust grows through repetition. Reliability is rarely dramatic. It is found in small acts performed consistently over time. Keeping promises, respecting boundaries, showing honesty even when deception. Confidence should not. When you allow patience to guide your judgment, you give reality enough time to replace illusion. That patience is not weakness, it is wisdom protecting your future. Never be afraid to let time do the work that emotions cannot. Anyone can impress you for a moment, but only character can withstand the test of time. As you become more patient and begin allowing people to earn your trust, another skill naturally develops. You stop looking only for admirable qualities, and you begin noticing warning signs before they become painful experiences. One of the biggest misconceptions about manipulation is that manipulators look obviously suspicious. In reality, they often appear unusually charming, attentive, and emotionally engaging. They understand that trust is the doorway to influence, so they invest heavily in creating a positive first impression. They know that if they can shape the way you see them early on, you will be more likely to excuse behaviors that would otherwise concern you. This is why first impressions should never become final conclusions. They praise you excessively, agree with almost everything you say, and create a sense of instant emotional closeness. While genuine enthusiasm certainly exists, healthy relationships usually develop through mutual discovery over time. When emotional intensity races far ahead of real familiarity, it is worth slowing down and asking why. Another warning sign is the inability to accept responsibility. Pay close attention to how someone explains past conflicts. If every former friend was jealous, people who consistently refuse accountability often repeat the same patterns because they never believe they are the source of them. There is also a subtler form of manipulation that appears almost harmless at first. It begins with small attempts to influence your emotions rather than your decisions. Perhaps someone makes you feel guilty for setting reasonable boundaries. Perhaps they withdraw affection whenever you disagree with them, only to become warm again once you give in. Or maybe they constantly position themselves as the victim in every situation. But when they become recurring patterns, they deserve your attention. Another revealing habit is inconsistency. Manipulative people often adapt their personality to fit the audience in front of them. They tell different stories to different people. Their opinions shift depending on who holds power. Their values appear flexible whenever personal advantage is available. Authentic individuals certainly grow and change over time, but their core principles remain recognizable. They do not need to become a different person in every room they enter. It is equally important. Respectful people encourage you to maintain your friendships, interests, and personal boundaries. Those seeking control may gradually discourage these things, not through direct commands, but through subtle pressure, criticism, or emotional discomfort. Influence often begins quietly. By the time control becomes obvious, it has usually been growing for much longer than anyone realized. Perhaps the most dangerous mistake is believing that intelligence or experience alone protects you from manipulation. These are strengths, not weaknesses, but they become vulnerabilities when they are separated from discernment. The answer is not suspicion, it is awareness. Observe patterns instead of isolated incidents. Give yourself permission to pause when something feels consistently out of alignment. Trust your observations enough to investigate them rather than explaining them away. You do not need to accuse people, confront every inconsistency, or assume the worst. You simply need to let reality speak louder than hope. In the end, the people who protect their peace are not those who distrust everyone. They are the ones who recognize that character is revealed in patterns, not performances. The greatest defense against manipulation is not fear, it is the quiet discipline of seeing people as they truly are, not as you wish them to be. Once you learn to recognize patterns, avoid manipulation, and allow trust to be earned instead of assumed, your perspective begins to shift in an even deeper way. You stop asking, "What kind of person is this?" and begin asking a far more powerful question. What motivates this person? That question changes everything because behavior rarely appears out of nowhere. Human beings like to believe they are guided purely by principles, but in reality, our decisions are constantly shaped by competing motivations. We seek security, recognition, belonging, status, comfort, control, and meaning. These motivations are not inherently good or bad. They are simply part of being human. The important thing is not that people have motives. The important thing is knowing which motives consistently influence their choices. Listen carefully to what people say they value, but pay even closer attention to what they repeatedly sacrifice for. There is often a significant gap between declared values and lived priorities. Someone may insist that family is the most important thing in their life, yet consistently choose prestige over meaningful relationships. Another person may constantly speak about honesty, but tell small lies whenever the truth becomes inconvenient. A colleague may claim to believe in teamwork while quietly taking individual credit whenever success appears. These contradictions are not unusual. They reveal the hierarchy of a person's values, and that hierarchy is far more predictive than any speech they could ever give. This is why priorities are more revealing than personalities. Personality describes how someone presents themselves. Priorities reveal how they make decisions when resources are limited. Time, energy, attention, and opportunity are all limited. What a person consistently invests these in tells you what truly matters to them. One of the most overlooked principles in psychology is that incentives shape behavior. When the rewards change, behavior often changes with them. This does not mean everyone is selfish. It means every person responds to what they believe will benefit them, whether that benefit is financial, emotional, social, or psychological. Imagine someone who behaves with remarkable generosity. Another individual remains dependable even when there is no applause, no reward, and no personal advantage. That consistency suggests that integrity itself has become part of their identity rather than a strategy for gaining approval. Watch what people do when there is nothing to gain. Those moments often reveal more than years of conversation. Fear is another powerful motivator that many people overlook. Some people seek control because they fear uncertainty. Others become defensive because they fear rejection. You begin seeing that many difficult behaviors are attempts to protect an insecure self-image, rather than deliberate attacks against you. This understanding does not mean excusing harmful conduct. Compassion and discernment are not opposites. You can understand why someone behaves a certain way while still deciding that their behavior is unhealthy for your life. In fact, that balance is one of the highest forms of emotional intelligence. It allows you to remain empathetic without becoming naive. As you observe people over time, ask yourself simple questions. What consistently energizes them? What do they protect at all cost? What makes them uncomfortable? The answers to these questions reveal the invisible forces directing their choices. When you understand motivation, the future becomes easier to predict because people usually repeat the behaviors that serve their deepest needs. Circumstances may change, but unresolved desires and fears often remain remarkably stable. Never allow appearances to distract you from incentives. When you understand what people truly value, you no longer have to guess who they are. Their motivations quietly reveal the direction they will choose. Every time, by this point, you may be wondering whether all of this observation, caution, and analysis, when you understand what people truly value, you no longer have to guess who they are. The goal is not to become emotionally distant or suspicious of everyone you meet. The goal is to become wise enough to trust with intention instead of impulse. There is a profound difference between being guarded and being bitter. A guarded person has learned to protect what is valuable while remaining open to genuine connection. A bitter person closes every door because of the pain caused by a few. Wisdom always chooses the first path. Many people swing between two extremes. They either trust everyone too quickly, believing that kindness alone will protect them. The balanced path is slower, quieter, and ultimately much stronger. Think of trust as an investment rather than a gift. No wise investor commits everything after a single promising conversation. They observe, they gather evidence, they evaluate consistency over time, they accept that confidence grows through repeated proof, not hopeful assumptions. Relationships deserve the same discipline. Healthy boundaries are part of this process. Boundaries are often misunderstood as walls designed to keep people out. In reality, they are filters that allow the right people to come closer while protecting you from those who do not respect your values. A trustworthy person does not become offended simply because you need time, clarity, or mutual respect. In fact, they usually appreciate those qualities because they practice them themselves. Notice how people respond when you politely say no. Watch what happens when you disagree respectfully or choose not to meet every expectation they place upon you. Those moments reveal whether someone values you as a person or simply values the access they have to your time, attention, and emotional energy. Every person has weaknesses, moments of poor judgment, and personal struggles. Emotional intelligence is not about demanding perfection. It is about distinguishing between occasional mistakes and consistent patterns of harm. A sincere apology followed by changed behavior is very different from repeated excuses followed by repeated disrespect. Another important lesson is learning to trust yourself. Many people ignore their own observations because they fear appearing judgmental or overly cautious. The more carefully you observe reality, the stronger your inner judgment becomes. You stop relying entirely on other people's opinions. You stop needing constant reassurance about what you already sense. This confidence is not arrogance. It is the quiet certainty that comes from paying attention. Ironically, the better you become at reading people, the less often you need to prove it. You no longer rush into unnecessary confrontations or expose every inconsistency you notice. You simply make wiser decisions about where to invest your time, your loyalty, and your trust. In the end, the greatest reward is not that you become impossible to deceive. No one can achieve that. The greatest reward is that you become far less likely to ignore reality in favor of comforting illusions. You begin building relationships based on evidence instead of fantasy, character instead of charm, and consistency instead of promises. That is how trust becomes a strength instead of a vulnerability. So as you leave here today, remember this: observe patiently, think clearly, and trust gradually. They are the ones whose character remains true long after the first impression has faded.